Hey, who do you think you are? You think you know better than the brethren? You think you know better than the prophet? You are on some big fat ego trip. If you think that all those things that you have studied about the church has brought you to some other conclusion, and you are just really full of yourself. Have you heard this stuff as you are leaving the church, or you've shared things with believing members of the church, and they kind of give you that attitude? Well, if you've experienced that, or it troubles you, or you even doubt and wonder whether maybe you're making the wrong choice, this video is for you. And before I get started, I just want to let you know everything that you need to get connected with me, you can get down below. I have written some books on transitioning out of the LDS church. I've also have an online Facebook group for support that would love to have you join us. Also, I have some online courses, I do private coaching, and I have this video channel. So if anybody is finding this helpful or supportive, please just subscribe below, and please leave a comment below too. Share with me some of your experiences as you've been leaving the LDS church. So let's get started. I'm going to be reading from my notes here. So that's what I'm looking at here. I just want to make sure that I got everything in. So as you begin to share with some of the people that are believing members of the church that you are just seeing things differently, and that you're ready to leave. And for many of us, we're going to hear that you are arrogant, that you are prideful, that you are thinking that you know more than the ordained authorities and the brethren and the prophet of God. How could you defy the prophet of God who loves us and is leading us? So to believing members, that might have appeared that you are having an ego trip, and that you are leaning more toward your intellect, and you're discounting your spiritual reasoning and your spiritual faculties, and you're straying from the path of righteousness. I did hear this a lot as I was leaving, and I know many of you do too. So let's talk about this for a minute. Let's consider what it is the ego actually is. The ego is that part of the mind that's associated with our identity. It is commonly associated with vanity and arrogance and superiority, pomposity, big-headedness, conceit. And actually what that is a toxic ego. It's an underdeveloped ego, a fragile ego, an inflated ego, not necessarily the ego. The real definition of the ego is simply the aspect of yourself and how you see yourself in contrast to others and to the world. And so to say that your ego is your arrogance and your vanity is really just kind of misconstrued. In the process of your religious transition out of the LDS church, we do experience a crisis of the ego. But it isn't because we think we know better, or that we think we are better, or because we're so happy and glad that we know little tidbits of information that other people don't know. On the contrary, this crisis of the ego has to do with the disturbance of our identity and our perspective of ourself and how we have situated ourselves in the world. It has to do with our self-worth. So it has to do with our right to differentiate from the tribe. It has to do with discovering our personality in the absence of indoctrination. And it is a big challenge. So the process of transition is a process of ego deconstruction, not inflation. The LDS church is actually a system and a theology that feeds an unhealthy ego. Its doctrines teach exceptionalism, that we are the only ones with the authority to administer ordinances required for exaltation. That's pretty audacious. We're the only ones that can be covenant holders that will become kings and queens in the next life to rule and reign. I don't know who we're going to rule and reign over. Probably, infidels like me. I don't know. But the it's interesting that is a superiority, and that is an arrogance, and that is a stand in the world and contrasting the world, saying that we are above and you are othered. You are out of the circle and the right circle and the favored circle. This isn't just LDS theology, it's any religion that claims that exclusivity. Trying to leave that indoctrination can be very difficult, and it's ego deconstruction. So, in psychology, the reference to a fragile ego is one whose identity is so enmeshed with being included and being safe and being loved and being right and being accepted that any threat to this constructed identity creates a defense or a dysfunction within the mind that will do anything and everything, including disregard reason and facts and information, to maintain that structure, because we're afraid of losing our identity. We're afraid that we're not going to belong. We're afraid we're not going to have community. We're afraid we won't be included. It is one of our greatest desires is to feel like we belong somewhere. So when we seek to develop a healthy ego, we're actually willing to challenge our constructed identity, and we risk losing that safety of the tribe. We risk losing being included and belonging and being accepted and being right in an effort to find our true and our authentic self without all these layers of indoctrination. Who are we underneath? So it's a journey to find ourselves without thinking that we are who we've been told we are, but really wanting to know who we are without the indoctrination. And it's a part of natural adult growth and development. And in my opinion, any system or theology or institution that prohibits or stunts one's natural growth by using fear and obligation and duty and shame is an unhealthy system. It is an abusive system to the natural growth and development of the soul. So, in short, at this point of transition, you are becoming willing to risk losing everything, risk offending, hurting, losing family members and those that we love in order to stop betraying ourselves and what is starting to develop as our own differentiated convictions. And this is a natural part of growing up. So in this effort to deconstruct our ego, here are a couple things that you're going to be learning. You're going to learn to accept that you have the right to differentiate from the tribe, that you have a right to think outside of the box, that there is no exclusivity to information and the truth, that it is not obtainable only through certain men and prophets and hierarchies. You're going to learn to think well of yourself without the need to exaggerate your achievements and your goodness or to meet the requirements of the system or the tribe. You're going to learn to become mentally strong enough to face life's challenges without thinking that you need a God to rescue you. It doesn't mean you don't believe in God, but your ideas of God are going to shift and change. And this is an epic transition for you, because the God of Mormonism really, there's so much certainty and so much structure to it that, inviting a new concept of God can be really feel unstable, and you risk feeling that instability and that uncertainty. That's a deconstruction of the ego. It's not an ego trip. So you're also going to learn to see yourself as a good person for who you are, and not because of what you believe or your level of obedience and conformity. You're going to learn to see that one's worth or one's worthiness is not contingent on what dogma they subscribe to. You're going to learn to honor and value the perspectives of other people, but you're going to learn to honor your own set of values above all else, because you understand that your set of values is what's going to govern your actions. This is all part of adult development and growing up. So instead of seeing yourself as a member of an exclusive, favored group, you're going to see yourself as part of the whole. your mind begins to see in a more unified manner. You begin to connect with each other for who they are and not for what they believe. It's an expansion of your faith and an expansion of connection to the whole world. And you're no longer, your mind begins to see more unified, not trying to separate or weigh or measure or fight for exclusivity or division between us and them. I know when my experience in the church, it was definitely, we are the saints. We are the Latter-day Saints. And those are the other people. And that is a very immature development of the mind or underdevelopment of the mind. So you're just growing up. Your mind can no longer conform to such a tiny paradigm or worldview. So in short, when you make this heavy, complex decision to leave this egocentric indoctrination, you are willing to risk losing your community, your relevance in your family, and even respect. You're willing to risk belonging, or that certainty, that stability. You risk having an authority in your life. And that can be troublesome all in itself if you're used to following some other entity and being willing to develop that sovereignty from within. That in itself is development. It's adult development that can't happen in constructs where they are establishing a hierarchy of worthiness and information, and that information comes through that line of the prophet rather than coming central to you and yourself. You're willing to risk relationships and safety within the tribe and acceptance. And in LDS theology, you are willing to risk losing the favor of the Holy Ghost, to not have the Spirit to be with you anymore, so they say. And also your secured position in the celestial kingdom and your right to live with God in the next life and be bonded and sealed to your family. There's a lot to lose. So again, this is a deconstruction of the ego. It's not an inflation of the ego. It's terrifying. It's difficult, and it's going to take some time. And that's why I love the coaching that I do, because I want to be here to support you during this time, because for many of us, we are the first ones in our family to leave, and it can be pretty scary. It feels like you're out in the desert walking alone, because those family members, they haven't asked the same questions that you've asked. And so they're not on the same plane, and that support system that's usually there for you during crisis collapses, and you are left to yourself, which is a beautiful place to be as you learn to have that sovereign mind and to move into more self-awareness. So the process of reconstructing your ego, that can be just as difficult as deconstructing the ego, but it's probably a video for another time, because this video is already coming more around 13 minutes here. But the next time that you hear somebody, challenge you and say, why do you think you know more than the prophet? And you're just being prideful and you're leaning more to your intellect than you are to your spiritual faculties. Remind those challengers that your willingness to collapse your worldview is an epic show of tremendous humility. That is humility, to stop thinking that you have all the answers, to open your belief system to new possibilities. And that is essential for growth and expansion. And that is what you're doing, and you can do it without apology. It's worth risking losing everything and everyone to find yourself with a free and sovereign mind in which to create a world that feels good and true and solid for you. And it's a big deal. So I hope this video was helpful. Again, if you want to connect, look on all the links below, and I hope to meet up with you. I'd love to hear your stories and your thoughts about this video. Take care. Bye.